But I have it confirmed from both sides that this letter does in fact exist because it was collected as FBI evidence. A letter that was authored by Roberta Laundrie, meant for Brian Laundrie. And this is the letter that was encased in some sort of an envelope of some kind. It said on it, "Burn after you read this." That was basically, in essence, the big letters that were the big message tied to this letter. And the letter, as it has been revealed through court documents, is that this letter contained details about a shovel and helping bury a body. Now, this goes back to when this story was the story across the country, when people were gravitating towards this story, people who believed that the Laundries were well aware of everything that was going on and that they weren't talking, and it was for the reason of that they knew so much and they didn't want to say what they knew. Of course, that they were dealing with everything that was going on in real time with Brian Laundrie's disappearance, and then, of course, when his remains were found. But the big thing here is that this letter does, in fact, exist. It was FBI evidence. The FBI collected this evidence over the course of their investigation, a letter that Roberta is said to have wrote to Brian, and we hope to get this letter at some point, just like we got the confession from Brian Laundrie, the 8 pages in the notebook. But this letter that Roberta wrote to Brian that says something about a shovel and helping bury a body. Stephen Bertolino, the attorney for the Laundrie family, has indicated to us, as I just check my phone, make sure I'm not getting any text messages from anybody watching the stream right now. Stephen Bertolino has communicated to us that the letter does exist. They do have it. It's still in their possession. It hasn't been destroyed. It's of course, it's been mentioned in this lawsuit that exists between the two families, but that the letter itself doesn't have anything to do with the Gabby Petito case, and that it predates everything. And I asked very specifically to Pat Riley, the attorney for the Petito and Schmidt families, is there any date or any mention specifically of Gabby Petito or anything that tells us what time frame this was written in? And the answer is no. So the FBI had this evidence. And the question is, people have been asking me repeatedly on social media when I post about this story, is that why the FBI didn't pursue charges against Chris and Roberta Laundrie, the mother and father of Brian Laundrie.
Well, this was the problem, I believe. Currently, they need to show a preponderance of the evidence. And this letter in and of itself should push them over. It was very convenient that there was no date on that letter, so Mr. Bertolino can again shuck and jive and try to say that that letter related to something that had nothing to do with Gabby Petito, even though it says burn after reading, and even though she was murdered viciously, and it involved a shovel, and I mean, it's just ridiculous, honestly. But the Bureau and the prosecution team, the United States Attorney, would have had to prove beyond any doubt. And my question would be, was this letter even ever given to Brian Laundrie? Did it end up in his hands?
Let's say it didn't. Let's say it didn't. Let's say the FBI uncovers this evidence and it's a letter that Roberta meant to give to her son, Brian, and it contains details about a shovel and the burying of a body. Even if it's not delivered to Brian, is that people would ask, well, isn't that proof that they were aware of Gabby's murder all along, and that they were, withholding information from investigators and so on and so forth?
Well, certainly that they were withholding information, certainly that they had knowledge, but they are entitled to their Fifth Amendment right, and they never made false statements to law enforcement. If they would have, we'd be, I believe they would have been charged, but they never said anything. And so therefore, the charge just didn't exist to charge just based on that letter.
If the FBI has the evidence and they believe that a crime was committed and they have the evidence that concludes that a crime was committed, they're going to proceed with charges, right? I mean, the fact 100%. That they had this evidence in their possession and then discharged it back to Stephen Bertolino, who gave it back to the families, or still has it in his possession, as I understand it. So that there's no they were going to, if they could have proceeded with criminal charges, they would have.
Exactly. Dick Ludwig, who was my mentor for 10 years, old crusty Hoover guy. And when I first studied underneath him, if you will, first came up as a baby agent underneath him, he would call me into his office when I had a case and predicated that I thought we should move forward on. And he'd tell me, listen, you go get the CFRs, go get the law. And we would break down each aspect of the law that, based on the predication of the facts I had, related to that law. And that's what some people don't understand. You have to go back to the law, whether it's harboring, whether it's aiding and abetting, which were the possibilities in this case, accessory, conspiracy. You need to look up each of those and then ask yourself, based on just this letter, did that meet the legal standard in those possible crimes? And in this case, it did not.
We have to wrap up our live stream here shortly. But the other question that I get all the time, and I'll bring up Sue's comment here on screen, and talking about the Laundries and a conviction. But here's the thing. The Laundries, up until this point, make this very clear. The Laundries Chris and Roberta have never been faced with a charge. They've never been charged with anything in relation to the Brian Laundrie investigation, the Gabby Petito investigation. But people have also asked me, Jennifer, this civil lawsuit, the civil trial is looming, and people are interested, of course, in the evidence that gets presented at trial. And people have asked me all the time, if in a civil trial, if evidence is brought to light that is criminal in nature, can the FBI reopen the investigation and proceed with criminal charges against, just in general? Not even just with this case, just in general.
If there were something new that came forward as a part of this proceeding, absolutely it could be used. And I do want to also say, I think the Petito and Schmitz have a great case, and I just hope justice is served in this case, JB, because that's a family, and particularly Nikki, who I've communicated with against. I can't imagine bearing the burden she's had to bear, which is the loss of her daughter, and the grace which this family has handled this tragedy. And I'm glad that there is an avenue for them to get justice.
I want to highlight this last comment from Kat. JB, Jennifer, both mentioned here in this. I'll read the question. So if Bertolino claims the letter has absolutely nothing to do with the Gabby case, why doesn't he just put it out to the public? I asked for the letter. I asked for it with basically the same exact kind of, if it's inconsequential, then why don't you just put it out to the public? If it's going to potentially come out at trial, why? I've been told that he is not going to release it. That's basically what I've been told. But Kat's thinking here is very along the lines of many others. If Stephen Bertolino says the letter has nothing to do with the Gabby Petito case, then I think it was as it was described to me, and I apologize if I'm shortening this, but the way Bertolino described it to me was, this is a letter that exists between a mother and a son. We're not going to be releasing it. That's basically, in essence, what he said. So, Jennifer, I'd like to really thank you. We only